The days following the first towing incident changed the entire atmosphere of the neighborhood. What had once been a place of quiet suburban routines now felt tense, uneasy, and almost hostile. Every parked car became a target. Every notice slipped into a mailbox a potential threat. For many, it was easier to comply, to push their vehicles into cramped garages, to pretend nothing was wrong. But for the homeowner at the center of this story, compliance was no longer an option. The HOA had made it personal, and now it was time to fight back. The first step was simple: information. Before any plan could take shape, there needed to be proof. Clear, undeniable evidence of the HOA's selective enforcement. And so began a quiet campaign of observation. Each morning, while sipping coffee by the front window, notes were taken. Which homes had cars in the driveway? Which driveways were filled with trucks, motorcycles, or even RVs? Which board members ignored their own rules without consequence? Slowly, a detailed record began to form. It didn't take long for the hypocrisy to become glaring. One board member had 3 vehicles in their driveway at all times, including one that hadn't moved in weeks. Another routinely parked a company van overnight, clearly against the so-called aesthetic uniformity policy. Yet no bright violation notices appeared on their windshields. No threats of towing ever materialized. The evidence practically piled itself. By the end of the first week, an entire notebook was filled with dates, times, and photographs. Neighbors, too, began to whisper their own stories of unfair treatment. One admitted that they had been fined for leaving their trash bins out a day too long, while another revealed that they had been forced to remove a basketball hoop because it was deemed unsightly. The pattern was undeniable. Rules weren't about order, they were about control. The next step was to reach out quietly to the other homeowners. It started with casual conversations by mailboxes, the kind that seemed innocent to anyone watching. The topic would drift toward the HOA, the towing incident, and the ridiculous driveway rule. At first, most neighbors were hesitant. No one wanted to draw the board's attention or risk retaliation. But when shown the collected evidence, the photos of board members violating their own rules, the notebook of dates and times, confidence began to build. People realized they weren't alone. By the second week, a small but determined group had formed. They weren't yet ready to confront the board head-on, but the beginnings of resistance were taking shape. Information was shared, more photos were taken, and the network of watchful eyes grew. Every violation committed by the board itself was quietly documented, carefully stored, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Meanwhile, the HOA continued to escalate. Another round of notices was distributed, this time more aggressive in tone. The language was designed to intimidate. Words like mandatory compliance, legal consequences, and immediate enforcement. The threats of towing became bolder, promising swift action for anyone who dared to challenge the rule. The board believed they were tightening their grip, but in reality, every new notice only fueled the growing resistance. The homeowner, however, knew that information alone wasn't enough. Revenge required timing, precision, and a strategy that couldn't be dismissed. It wasn't just about proving the board's hypocrisy, it was about dismantling their credibility entirely. To do that, the evidence needed to be undeniable and delivered in a way that couldn't be ignored or covered up. One evening, while scrolling through community bylaws and past HOA meeting notes, a critical discovery was made. The new driveway rule had never been properly ratified. It had been mentioned in a meeting, proposed by a particularly vocal board member, and then quietly inserted into the community newsletter as if it were law. But according to the bylaws, major changes required a formal vote, approval by a majority of residents, and proper documentation. None of that had ever happened. The realization was explosive. Not only was the rule absurd and selectively enforced, but it wasn't even legally binding. The HOA had been bluffing, banking on intimidation and fear to make homeowners comply. This was the weapon that could turn the tide, the kind of discovery that could unravel everything the board had built its authority on. But simply knowing the truth wasn't enough. It had to be revealed at the right time, in the right way. The plan began to take shape. Expose the board's hypocrisy, reveal the illegitimacy of the rule, and do it in front of as many neighbors as possible. If done correctly, the board wouldn't just lose its credibility, it would lose its control. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A community-wide HOA meeting was announced, one of those mandatory gatherings where the board lectured residents on compliance, finances, and maintenance fees. Normally, few people showed up. But this time, word quietly spread through the growing resistance network. Show up, stay quiet, and watch the fireworks. In the days leading up to the meeting, preparations intensified. The notebook of violations was copied, photographs were printed, and excerpts of the bylaws were highlighted and organized. Every piece of evidence was ready to be displayed at a moment's notice. The homeowner was nervous, but the thought of revenge, of finally turning the tables, kept the determination burning strong. The night of the meeting, the community center parking lot was surprisingly full. More residents had shown up than anyone could remember, a sign that frustration had spread far and wide. Inside, the board members sat at their table, smug and self-assured, ready to deliver their usual lectures. They believed they were in control. They had no idea what was coming. As the meeting began, the tension in the air was thick. The board launched into its announcements, including a stern reminder about driveway violations and the ongoing enforcement of the policy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People exchanged glances. Everyone knew what was about to happen. Everyone except the board. When the floor was open for community questions, the moment finally arrived. The homeowner rose, evidence in hand, ready to strike. The room grew quiet. All eyes turned. This was it. The moment when the fight against the HOA truly began.